by a bent line, by a straight line, by a crooked line. The Crooked Path, a podcast for modern cunning folk with Peter Pagan. Hello and welcome to The Crooked Path. My name is Peter Pagan, and this week we'll be taking a look at whether you have to be British to be a British witch. But first, here's some news. Well, first of all, Wendy Rule is going to be back in town next week. She's flying in from Australia, and she is going to be performing at the Goddess Centre in Pasadena on Saturday, so check out the Googles to get your information on that. Just look up Wendy Rule, Pasadena 2014, and you should find her quite easily, and it should be a great night. She is in fine voice. Also, for those of you who are on the East Coast, I'm going to be in North Carolina the first weekend in September 5th, 6th, 7th, in New Bern, East North Carolina, teaching a weekend intensive on British witchcraft. So if you've ever wanted to throw something in my face, that's the time to do it. It's being hosted by Doug and Anna Helvey of the Eternal Harvest Church, and I'm looking forward to seeing everybody over there again. So that should be fun. And let me see, there was something else, and it's completely escaped my fetid imagination. Oh yes, Hex Fest, August 2015 in New Orleans. Tickets are going fast. It's over a year away and already tickets are going fast, so just giving you a heads up, there's a limited attendance. If you want to visit the Big Easy with a load of big witches, and some of them even famous, it might be a good idea. In addition to my own good self and Christian Day and his partner Brian, you will also find such luminaries as Christopher Penzac, Fiona Horn, Raven Gramassi, who I'm personally looking forward to sitting on a course with, and a whole bunch of other very interesting and fascinating creatures. Mama Star will be there representing Conjure. There'll be a bunch of really good and interesting voodoo people, and Bloody Mary, of course. And I'm reliably informed that the opening ritual for the whole event will be taking place on the Friday evening on the last remaining fully functional Mississippi steamboat. That's something else I'm looking forward to. Dinner and a ritual on a Mississippi steamboat, not to be missed. So anyway, and of course it's all happening in the French Quarter. Everything that's anything happens in the French Quarter. So I'm looking forward to that, even though it's over a year away, and hopefully you are too. So that's the news, and this is going to be another ramble session from me, so there isn't going to be any of the pretty music interludes that I normally do for my more organised shows, but I decided it was time for a good old ramble/rant again. So that's what we're doing today. So the subject I want to meander aimlessly along is British Traditional Witchcraft. Do you have to be British to practice it? Do you have to be in Britain to practice it? These are two questions that seem to be floating around the blogosphere at the moment, various people commenting on it. And I have been cited as an authority on it by some of them for some strange reason, and I guess the fact that I am British and I'm not in Britain gives me an insight into it. So I'm going to give you my very personal perspective on it. I think you can already guess what that is, and I'm also going to give you my personal opinion on some of the opinions that are out there, because some of them have been thrown at me in the past. I have been told, in fact, that even though I'm British, because I'm no longer living in Britain, I cannot call what I do British witchcraft, which seems a bit weird to me, because just because I'm in Los Angeles doesn't make me any less British, doesn't even make me any less Welsh. It makes me a little more inclined to sweat, especially in the beautiful hot and humid weather we're having today. So if I seem to be glistening on camera, it isn't some glamour, it's me perspiring, I'm afraid, which is much less glamorous, if you pardon the expression. So yeah, there's this discussion that's going around on the various blogs and podcasts that some people, notably people in Britain, are claiming that in order to be a British traditional witch, you have to be both British and practicing on British soil. They're basically saying that the gods of British witchcraft don't travel well. Which, when you consider the history of Britain, is that it's been invaded by people from all over. The Romans, the Celts, the Saxons, the Vikings, the Normans, and they've all brought their gods with them. I mean, for heaven's sake, the late great JC is a Mediterranean import. He came in along with kebabs and God knows what from the local Greek and Turkish restaurants. He is an import, and he seems to manage okay. So given that most of the deities that are seen as eponymous in Britain are actually themselves imports to a certain extent, why would they then not be able to go anywhere else? I mean, I know that as pagans we don't believe in an omnipotent, omniscient, all-encompassing deity, well, most of us, but gods that have lost their travel rights, that just doesn't sound right to me. And of course I am very opinionated, but that doesn't mean I'm wrong. I can tell you from my own personal experience that it actually wasn't until I came to Los Angeles that I actually finally connected with my ancestry and my Welsh Celtic deities. They were always there in the background, but I never really made that visceral connection with them until I came here. And do you know why? Because here is where they wanted me to be. So, yeah, maybe I should call it Angelino witchcraft, which I'm not going to do, so don't worry about that. But my Welsh ancestors and my Welsh deities tell me that I need to practice what I'm practicing right here, right now. And that settles it as far as I'm concerned. But for the sake of conversation, and because that is very subjective obviously, because it's my opinion and isn't empirical in any way, shape or form, let's actually discuss the pros and cons. First of all, let's discuss what witchcraft is, because once again, this is my very opinionated opinion on the subject, but as far as I'm concerned, a lot of people have a very warped idea of what witchcraft is. As I've said before in previous podcasts, for me, witchcraft is a collection of practices, of magical practices, and it is expressed through the spirituality or religion of the practitioner. So I know that some people have referred to me as a Welsh witch, or practicing Welsh witchcraft. I've even occasionally used the phrase myself to save time. And I've had at least one person completely surprise me out of nowhere by referring to me as a foremost authority on Welsh witchcraft, which I'm sure really was really something that the Gwython in Wales wanted to hear. But the simple fact is that my witchcraft isn't Welsh. My spirituality is Welsh. I practice a form of Welsh Celtic paganism, and I practice my witchcraft through that spirituality. My witchcraft is not confined to any location. It is general purpose witchcraft. It's a shamanic style, Luciferian, experiential set of practices that works with ancestors and with spirits. And some of those spirits are deities, and the deities that I choose to work with because of my ancestry are the Welsh Celtic gods and goddesses. I could just as easily stick to the Saxon pantheon, to the Norse pantheon, to the Egyptian pantheon, to the Christian pantheon, to the flying spaghetti monster, to hell, to brain gone dead, reboot.
Cthulhu.
Yeah, Cthulhu, Lovecraftian. Well, the one I was actually trying to get to was the 3-hour tour.
Gilligan's Island?
Gilligan's Island, yeah, because believe it or not, in somewhere north of here, there is a coven whose pantheon are the characters from Gilligan's Island.
Really?
And the Manifest Universe is a 3-hour tour that's lasted somewhat longer than it was originally meant to.
Wow.
It works for them, hey, who am I to knock it? But the point is that witchcraft isn't geographically isolated. It isn't specific to a region. There are specific traditions that are specific to a region. If you're part of the old school Strega, the Strega witches in Italy who have their grand sabbats at the top of Benevenito Mountain, then it probably is a good idea that you can get to that mountain. If you are a member of the Welsh Gwython and your practice is centred around the stewardship and guardianship of specific Neolithic sites in Wales, it's a lot easier to do that if you're actually in Wales. That makes sense. But those are specific traditions. Witchcraft is not geocentric. It is a series of practices. We think of it as originating in Saxon Britain because that's where all the elements really come together. But it is a constantly evolving thing. There is nobody living on the planet today who practices pure Saxon witchcraft. No matter what they might think, or you might think, or I might think of what we do, none of it is pure because it all evolves and grows. And that's damn right it should too, because if it's not evolving and growing, it is dead, ossified, it is a shell. So nobody should want to be a purist in that sense. And it really annoys the hell out of me in general when people say stupid things like this, and especially when they try to say that I can't be a witch, talking about me specifically, because although I'm British, I'm not in Britain. Bull. My broomstick can fly over water, thank you very much. It's just ridiculous. And when it comes to, even when you add in the spiritual aspect of it, my spirituality, Welsh Celtic pantheon, centred around the stories of the Mabinogion. Now, first of all, the Mabinogion is a collection that was put together in the Victorian era by Lady Charlotte Guest, and misnamed by her, but the name stuck. It's a collection of stories, and she's the one who decided what was in it and what wasn't. Some of them come from the Red Book of Hengist, some of them come from the White Book, some of them are poems from Taliesin, some of them, like the story of Ceridwen, the earliest version we've got for it is the 7th century AD, and some people have decided arbitrarily that that means Ceridwen isn't a goddess. Well, I'd like to see them tell her to her face. I would love to see them tell her to her face. The fact is that everywhere humans go, they take their gods with them. And in my case, I came here and they were sitting here waiting for me. There's nothing, there's no barriers. The oceans are not a barrier. The lines drawn on a map are not a barrier. Unless you're trying to smuggle drugs, in which case, you know, they can be. The point is that our ancestors, if you go back far enough, our ancestors were around before there were countries. As I often say in my own tradition, with my own people in my coven, the sacred land existed before there were countries, before there were borders. And if you dig deep enough, you can contact it at that level. You can contact it anywhere in the world. Those of you who've been listening to my podcast for long enough will remember me doing experiments all around the world when I had the opportunity to do so. Calling on my ancestors in Hong Kong, in Rio, in Germany, all over the shop. And guess what? Everywhere I called on them, they popped up and said hi. So I understand what is generally going on with this is, with the big old internet joining everybody together, there's this horrible tendency for people's egos to get bruised, because suddenly they're not so special anymore, because suddenly young Di, who's working in Caerphilly and has got everyone convinced he's the Grand High Magus of the only true Welsh coven on the planet is competing with people in New York and Philadelphia and Saudi Arabia who know more than he does. And so the only way he can maintain his little illusion is to say that they are not real. And I'm seeing a lot of that. I mean, and ironically, most of it is coming from people in Britain. It really saddens me to see this, because when you look at the people who are actually doing the work over here in America, I mean, I know the British pagan community generally has a great deal of disdain for the American pagan community. And sometimes it's justified. Americans can be brash, shallow, and annoying as hell. Some of them can. But you know, there are people over here who are doing the work, and sometimes I think that's more than you can say about the folk in England, because back in England it seems to be all about secrecy and all about who's got the biggest set of balls. And that is really sad, because you really do have a legacy. But, you know, I've just had a friend over from the UK. She came over to initiate with us here. And do you know why? Because it's damn near impossible to join and train and initiate in traditional witchcraft in Britain, because the people who are supposedly doing it are so egotistical and so secretive that it's almost impossible to get to do it. They're so busy trying to guard their secrets from everyone else that they won't let anyone touch the stuff. And you know what's happening? It's dying out. It's getting rarer and rarer to find real traditional witchcraft in Britain, because they're all being so super secret. It's a bit like Cornish and Manx languages. I think it was the Manx language where there's only two native speakers left alive, and they don't like each other, so they're not talking, and it's going away. Cornish, the language of Kurno, almost went the same way, but luckily somebody started recording it and rescued it. In Wales, luckily, the language is thriving. But these, not just the languages, but the culture and the traditions are dying because people are refusing to share them. They're hoarding what they've got. They're poo-pooing anybody who's trying. There's a huge stink going on about Gemma Gary's books, because she's daring to create a modern synthesis and teach it and share it. And in the process, people are getting their noses put out of their joint, and they're starting to say that her stuff isn't real. Well, guess what? It is. It's just as real as anyone else's stuff. The fact that she has put it into a coherent system that works for her. Okay, you may not agree with her scholarship all the time. That's okay too. We don't have to agree with each other. What we do have to do is respect each other's sincerity where it's justified, and respect each other's effort in keeping the work going. The work is the most important thing, and we should be working together to preserve it and to build on it. That really is the core of what I'm so pissed about with this whole can't be a witch unless you're British in Britain thing, because it all boils down to people trying to clutch tightly to themselves things that they believe they have the sole right to. And that is not the case. If somebody is doing the work, they deserve the respect. No matter how they got there. If they got there from reading a book or from being initiated by a charlatan, but they got there anyway because they were able to pull themselves up by their own britches and make a real connection, then they should get kudos for that. That's one of the reasons why I make an absolute point these days of absolutely refusing to claim any kind of lineage or any kind of connection to any kind of organisation other than my own self and my ancestors. Because you can't get airs and graces if you do that. And if you haven't got airs and graces, you don't make these stupid mistakes. And it really is incredibly stupid and narrow-minded. Crafters over here, people who have got lineage and people who have made connections for themselves, whatever anyone else might think of them, Robin Artisan, Chris Penzac, who despite being someone who started out in Wicca, has made some very real connections in traditional craft as well. And I greatly respect him for that. He is a wonderful, wonderful crafter. He does the work. Whether you like his books or not is irrelevant. He does the work, and he earns the respect for that. And do you know what people over here are doing in America? We're talking to each other, we're sharing, we're letting our knowledge pool and grow, and we are becoming greater than the sum of our parts. And do you know what's happening in England? People are fighting and bickering and hoarding, and they're dying out. One day I can see a time where people won't talk about British traditional witchcraft anymore, because there won't be any left in Britain, because people are being absolutely stupid asses about the whole thing, and that is really sad. You'll have all the sacred sites and none of the magic, and you'll have nobody to blame but yourselves. So how about we stop this bickering and infighting about who's got the biggest damn craft penis in the room, and we actually start talking about how we can share and preserve this legacy that we've got from wherever it came. And how about we work together to make sure the work gets done, make sure the gods stay around, and make sure the ancestors get the respect and the attention that is due to them. And how about we stop fighting each other and start working like people who are spiritually enlightened the way we claim? Because then it doesn't matter where you come from or how you got there. What matters is that you put the work in and you are sincere and that you have something to bring to the table. And that's all that should matter. So that's my rant for today. If it annoyed you, then good. I hope it will make you rant and do something about it too. Because if you're not passionate about this, you're not trying hard enough. Mm-hmm. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll try and be a little bit more civilized next week. Take care now.
By a bent line, by a straight line, by a crooked line. The Crooked Path, a podcast for modern cunning folk with Peter Panham.